As you will immediately notice upon firing up Unravel 2, the number 2 isn't an actual numerical digit or even a Roman numeral like you normally expect to see in games, but rather it's spelled out. This of course helps drive the point home that in this game there are 2 playable characters, and the game does rely on cooperative play to get through most of the puzzles, whether that's with 2 actual players or 1 switching back and forth. It's obvious from the get-go that the developers wanted to make it fun to play with a friend or on your own, but as is generally the case with games like this, that perfect balance proves to be elusive. Ultimately, Unravel 2 does feel a little more like a co-op spin-off than a true sequel to the original, which may not be a problem for many, but I couldn't help but wonder what else might have been achieved if the developers spent their time on experimenting with level design generally instead of putting themselves in the box of needing to construct everything around 2-player cooperation. Admittedly, they did get respectably close with striking that balance between making a co-op game and also making a game that can be played solo, as Yarny can latch on to other Yarny at any time, controlling like one character. This makes traversal between the challenges seamless. You still need them separated to get through the bulk of the puzzles though. You can also change their yarn color, which I thought was a nice touch, and I found myself experimenting with that far more than I had any right to. I was very relieved to notice that the general aesthetic of the original game is fully intact. It's important to note that most of the fundamentals that made the first game so memorable did make it into the sequel, including the fetching look of such shallow depth of field, adorable visuals and art design, and an emotional soundtrack that guarantees to elicit vague feelings of childhood wonderment from anyone whose heart isn't completely made of stone. There's also a subtle, fleeting sense of eeriness that comes and goes, which adds some welcome emotional texture to the overall experience. A well thought out hint system is a nice addition as well, and can pull you out of most of those intellectual slumps that puzzle games eventually put most gamers in from time to time, while also providing a sense of direction and clearly illuminating your goals. On top of that, the sheer amount of content from story levels to bonus stages is quite a bit more than I was expecting, and should keep fans of this world coming back to it for longer than they probably expected. The puzzles themselves did get a little repetitious for me after a few hours though, and perhaps this is just a side effect of it being a puzzle game with such a clear style, as there are only so many combinations of the same puzzle elements that can be created, but at the same time, I would have appreciated 1 or 2 more puzzle types to keep things a little more fresh. However, the combination of refinement over the original game and sheer quantity of content is still a great trade for the friendly price. The controls feel a little tighter this time around, but still have that same near perfect harmony between the bounciness of something like Little Big Planet and the raw precision of something more like Super Meat Boy. It's a nice space to occupy for a puzzle platformer, and I wish more games would. Controlling Yarny and other Yarny feels great, and guiding them through the various stages is every bit the whimsical delight it needed to be. One thing I couldn't shake though was the feeling that the puzzles themselves were just meant to be played with 2 people. Switching back and forth between Yarnies while playing solo certainly can get things done, but it just doesn't feel like the way the levels should be played. I guess it's just in the game's DNA to have 2 independent players to maximize the experience. While I can tell that lots of thought went into making the game fun both ways, playing the game solo just makes it feel like less of a return to the world of Unravel and more like trying a different flavor of it. This might turn you off a bit, it might not, but personally, I would say it distracted me more than a few times during my solo play sessions. On top of that, there are some relatively long stretches where you might detect some repetition, which is a feeling I don't remember having in the original. Sadly, the background story about the 2 kids escaping from some sort of ambiguously unpleasant home life fell pretty flat for me, and just didn't add much to the experience. I suppose it further drives the concept of cooperation and friendship into the game thematically, but other than that, it basically had no effect on me. And I feel like this is another area of the game that probably could have benefited from getting some more attention, and really felt like an opportunity missed, especially considering how moving the story of the original was. Clearly, the team behind Unravel is capable of better storytelling than this, and I was a little disappointed to see how minimal and ineffective it ultimately was. There just isn't much to analyze here, and even though it is presented to us in a tasteful and at times endearing way, I just never felt connected to it at all. Granted, the story isn't really why you should play Unravel or Unravel 2. You should be playing these games for the atmosphere and the gameplay, but it would have been nice to see the story make me feel an ounce of what the originals did. Because of the solid foundation that the original built, Unravel 2 gets far more things right than it gets wrong, and the things that it gets wrong aren't even that wrong. Ultimately, it might feel slightly more derivative than fans were expecting from the first sequel to the original, especially considering that nobody was really complaining about the original's lack of a two-player mode, but it largely serves up its changes to the formula with finesse and care, minimizing any negative side effects of them. The puzzles are often satisfying to figure out and pitch perfect when it comes to difficulty. The musical score is outstanding, and the overall presentation of Unravel 2 continues to make Yarny stand out in a very old and crowded genre. Faltering only in small ways on occasion, the second outing into Yarny's world is still absolutely worth having, and if you want to get the most out of it, share the experience and bring along a good friend.
And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.